Please join me in welcoming Alysa Taylor, CMO, Commercial Cloud and AI, Microsoft.
I'm really excited about this session, which is focused on AI and gender equity. And the reason for my enthusiasm about this is I get to see every single day AI creating new opportunities, but also tackling some of society's greatest challenges. And so we collectively have this great opportunity to take all of that is happening in the world and provide new opportunities to more people around the world. And just to give you a couple examples, one of the things that we're seeing AI do in healthcare, it's a great industry, but today, over 50% of healthcare professionals face burnout. And that stat is actually up from the pandemic. And what we've seen in the last couple years with the combination of ambient intelligence coupled with generative AI, we actually see this technology working with physicians to be able to record and analyze patient-physician interaction. And by doing so, it actually alleviates a lot of the administrative and clinical burden that physicians face. And so when you take that away, it gives time back to the physicians to spend more time with their patients and ultimately improving care. Education, you just saw this in action. In the world of education, these new AI tools are actually allowing for more inclusive learning as well as accessibility. And then in climate, which we will all be talking about this week, AI is not only enabling us to predict weather patterns in a way that we couldn't before, but we're also seeing new material discovery come online. So we have things like lower carbon steel, concrete. We can also do resource allocation in new ways. So some of the world's greatest, scarcest resources like water, being able to predict water flows. These are all new opportunities and new things that are emerging every single day. But this AI economy, that you've heard the term, requires a new skilled workforce. And so we have to think about how do we skill the next workforce with the contrast of even today, if you look at STEM professionals, only 30% of STEM professionals today are female. And if you overlay AI on top of that, that number goes down to 22%. So we have work collectively to take these new economic opportunities that are emerging, these new industries that are being transformed with AI, and make sure that we have an equitable workforce that is skilled and ready to take on these opportunities. And that is why I'm incredibly excited to have two individuals joining me today to unpack this very important topic. The first is Director General Humba. He has had a long career in working to improve opportunities for the world's most vulnerable people. And in 2022, he was elected by the International Labor Organization to serve as the 11th Director General. And he was the first African to hold the position. He's focused on promoting greater social justice, fighting inequities of the world of work, and achieving better working conditions for all. I will also be joined by Michelle Milford-Morris. She leads the UN Foundation's work on promoting gender equality and the rights and agency of women and girls. Prior to this role, she worked on the global health and development issues with a range of UN private sector and civil society partners. Apolitical actually named Michelle one of the 100 most influential people in gender policy in 2021. So please join me, Director General and Michelle. Thank you so much for being here today. So a very important topic ahead of us, AI and gender equity. So Director General, I'm going to start with you, if I may. So the question I have for you, you have been with the IOL for the last 2 years, and obviously it's the UN's agency for work. It represents this period of time where we've had sort of a seismic change for workers and organizations and a lot happening across the world and just the nature of work itself. So will you tell us a little bit about what's top of mind for the agency, how you are focused on decent work and also ensuring workers around the world are protected?
First of all, thank you for having us here. I will start by recalling that in 2019, during 2019 was the centenary for ILO, because ILO was created in 1919. And one of the key moments in 2019 was already what we call the future of work. Already when the previous presenter was talking about 2019, I was also thinking about the same on that. So, you might be surprised that in ILO, we are quite very, very excited about the opportunities that AI offers. Our research has already been demonstrating how many millions of jobs that have been created and opportunities on that. At the same time, we also know that millions of jobs are now being wiped off, and therefore the key moment for us is how do you best ensure the transition.
Right.
The transition in ensuring that nobody's left behind. We are positive, and I think you will confirm that at least in the short, medium term, that more jobs will be created and transformed than the jobs that are going to be lost. But none of us in this room want to be in the category of the job to be lost.
We hope not.
And therefore, the challenge that we see from ILO is that we really need to ensure to have our strategies, and we are quite very worried that the policies are not necessarily following to ensure that the excitement created by the AI does not leave most of people on the side. And we're talking here about gender, and you just gave us some statistics, and we also know very well that if you take all those most repetitive type of activities, jobs, and we have a predominance of women, and therefore the risk of being left behind is higher for women, and therefore that's it. So that transition management for us is key.
It's very important. I think you're right, to get that sort of as the new opportunities are coming online, how we make sure that we skill the entirety of the world, but also that focus on gender. So that's fantastic. So, which is a great segue, Michelle, to you. So the UN Foundation, it has a broad and interdisciplinary mandate, and that is to advance the SDGs and the work of the United Nations. Obviously includes everything from human rights to the climate. But this, particularly your focus on how girls and women are at the center of this foundational work would be incredible to hear a little bit more about how you're thinking about it, how we're bridging the gender divide.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm delighted to be here, and it's a delight to be with you as well, Director General. 26 years ago, the UN Foundation was founded to work with and for the UN on humanity's biggest challenges. And I'm grateful that 26 years ago, our leaders, they recognized that we needed to work on climate, energy, and the environment and global health, but also girls' and women's rights, which 26 years ago, you couldn't take for granted that would rise to the top of priorities. But for us, it has. And so now today, we take our humble seat at the table with a proliferating set of partners, philanthropies, the private sector, member states as well, and lots of glorious civil society actors to push for women's full economic, political, and social rights. And we do that across a range of issues, and including this one, in fact, to make sure, as you mentioned, that girls and women are not left behind as emerging technologies become more prevalent in our lives as well. So
that's fantastic. Thank you. So, Director General, I'll go back to you. So, at the G20 in July, you called for decisive action to reduce inequality, promote gender equality, and encourage diversity in the workplace. So I think for us, it's really good to understand, how do we come together? You talked about bringing together partnerships. How do we foster that cooperation, and how do we create this notion of an inclusive but sustainable workforce?
I think our first point is to recognize that none of us can do it alone.
Right.
It looks basic, but in AI context, it's even more important. And the central piece will be, from ILO perspective, the whole skills and lifelong learning dimension, which we see as the glue in bringing all of us together. If we want to, of course, we are really pushing to do everything possible to reduce inequalities, social injustices, and per se. But by tackling the skills and the upskilling or reskilling in the context of AI, that clearly help us not only to take advantage of the opportunities, but at the same time, making sure that we bring everybody together. So skill, I will not repeat that enough. That for us is going to be key. Secondly, we do have also basics. You know, while I was really following the presentation made earlier, I couldn't help it by recognizing that how good the connection is or was. But I'm afraid if you go to my village, Agbandi in Togo, I'm not so sure that the connection will be that automatic.
The network, yes.
So the danger of the risk of digital divide is not just theoretical. It's real. It's real, and we really need to keep that in mind in moving forward. And again, talking about the inclusion. And the third point, and that's why I'm very glad that Michelle is also here. The third point, and I'll stop there.
No, this is why we're here.
It's important to have, all the parties at the table. In finalizing those policies on the way forward. So, okay, how do we ensure that? Listen, also, all of us have to fight for the gender equality, but particularly those that are there, those that we're trying to are at risk or are vulnerable groups, to also hear from them. And those 3 points seems to me quite very essential.
That's excellent. And I think we hear a lot of investment in skilling, but really putting that fine point on why skilling is so important, because it is. We're sort of at a race against the clock of, as you talked about in this transition. So the more we are skilling that next generation workforce, and the faster we are investing in that, and the more we are investing in that, it's really, really important. So, Michelle, we're talking about AI, obviously, and so you intersect between the United Nations, the civil partnerships. As you're engaging in these conversations, how does AI come up? So I'd love to hear kind of your perspective, the concerns, anything that's been a surprise along the way.
Well, I've just spotted at least one colleague from UN Women here, which I'm delighted to see her.
And saw some waving going on, so yes, that's good.
And I have to say, I'm delighted that UN agencies have really met this moment and have brought this conversation to the forefront. In fact, the Commission on the Status of Women, which happens every March, our 2-week festival for gender equality, not this past March, but the March before, it was dedicated to this topic entirely, about the intersection between emerging technology and AI and girls' and women's rights. And so I think people are taking it very, very seriously, which is absolutely appropriate and right. In those conversations, there are 2 things that are emerging and one thing that I found surprising. 2 things that are emerging are, number one, listen, the people who are working on girls' and women's rights, we have a tough road ahead of us. There is too much backlash, there's too much regression, and this is yet another area of the agenda where we have to do more and better for girls and women. So the legacy issues still exist, the pay gap, economic power, those things still exist, but now we also need to take this on and make sure that girls and women aren't left behind when it comes to emerging technology. The second thing is we have to take way more seriously the way that these things might be used to harm girls and women, and especially women who are running for office, and the way these things might be used to shame and silence them, and instead of making sure that we have equal political representation all over the world. The thing that surprises me, though, I was prepared to talk about political representation and how women who are running for office can use AI for gender friending, to talk to their constituents more readily. It's an efficiency tool. But then Dina inspired me with her presentation just before, because I thought about women are overrepresented in the ranks of teachers all over the world. Now, I think part of gender equality means making sure that men are also teachers, especially at the elementary and middle school level. But as long as women are overrepresented in those ranks, imagine how much time they could spend, because they could save if they had tools like this.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
women all over the world are already working second and third shifts because we haven't fixed the care gap. We don't have caring societies yet, and because of the pay gap, women often have second and third jobs. So those teachers, if they had tools that would save them time, that would be extraordinary for them. And we have to face that we all have a little bit of suboptimal software, right? We all have stereotypes in our heads that we've been given. We've all been raised in cultures that tell us kind of the wrong things about gender equality, the wrong things about the opposite sex. We all have that. If we get this right, and if it gives us things that are unburdened by those stereotypes and unburdened by the harmful norms, think about how that could change the way that we teach children to be in the world and to live in the world. That would be really extraordinary. So I'm now surprised by that and happy that I know more.
I love that. I love that. Well, it's just, obviously we are building on, we're learning as we go, and being able to have these new discoveries and these new ha-has are so critical for us. I'm going to tie what we were talking about here with, the intersection of AI and gender equality into the SDG 8. Particularly. So I want to kind of zero in on that, because I think that's, as we think about how do we get it back on track, I'd love, Director General, your thoughts on kind of the intersection of the discussion we're having right here.
But please allow me, and I hope you don't mind, Michelle, I really want to go back to one of your last points, like making sure it's unburdened. I just want to say that it's also important to ensure that the AI architecture, infrastructure, it's built in a way to make sure that it is unburdened. Absolutely. Otherwise, if we can also build it with the existing stereotype, what gets in comes out. We know that as well. Now, back to my preferred SDG 8. This is where we see really the AI as an opportunity. All of that being said and done, I keep saying that we shouldn't be so worried. There are risks that we need to manage. There are vulnerabilities. But by far and large, we need to look at that glass half full on that. And that's where, for me, if you look at the potential for AI contributing on wealth creation, talk about the economic growth.
Yes,
and therefore job creation and the respect of environment and contribution to other SDGs is huge. I will take a very specific example, is the platform economy. The platform economy and the supply chain. If you look at today, because of AI, how many jobs, particularly for the youth. Particularly, I was quite very impressed in several of my missions in the last 18 months or so, going to countries that are known to be less advanced countries. Yet, with all the connectivity problem that I was mentioning, the equivalent of Uber, I'm not talking about Uber, and I hope there's no Uber in the room, but the equivalent of Uber works perfectly. Perfectly. You don't even have, not all streets have names and like we have here in New York or in the States. Yet, because of AI, within 5 meters, if you call a Uber or equivalent in my country, they call it GoZem, it will come. And because of AI, so the platform is one particular example. I can also link that to the supply chain. So we have all those new developments that for us is hugely important for advancing and pushing and galvanizing the SDG 8. That being said, obviously, in ILO, we are concerned about some of the vulnerabilities that one has to manage on that. First of all, we do believe that, I believe the debate's still on, there's a need for a proper governance that has to be agreed worldwide, which is one. And secondly, the importance of ensuring a basic minimum protection. For the workers, whether they have any working relation with any enterprises or if they are by their own. We need to define and to ensure and collectively agree on what it is, that type of protection. We're going to launch our social protection report that we launch every 2 years, Wednesday. But that is one of the points, particularly you link it not only to the digital, to the AI, but also to the climate change, which is also part of the SDG 8. So, in a nutshell, for us, let's face it, one of the questions that I usually get, like, in 30 years from now, 20 years from now, what will the delta be, the job created and the job lost? Right now, we know that delta is positive. You are creating more jobs than jobs that are being lost. But in 20 or 30 years, I don't know. Maybe that delta could become negative. So that's not only the value, but the meaning of work in itself.
The changing workforce.
Yeah, it's also changing, and nobody has the absolute truth. We will need also to go beyond the SDG 8.
You know, you touched on the governance needed and the commitments, and I think one of the things that is so unique about this opportunity, just going even beyond, gender equality, is this notion of the public and private sectors coming together on both the commitments that we're making, gender equality being one of them, but then also the capabilities that the technology providers need to make sure that they are building into the platform to be able to do things like detect biases, like that, and to be able to protect, fundamental human rights within the technology. And so I think it's, we have all of these things that are happening very rapidly, but they all intersect. And so I think, again, our partnership, the public and private partnership, staying in lockstep, making sure we've got the right governing controls, commitments, but then also the technology protecting the human rights as well is really, really important. So today's conversation, I want to close us out on a note of hope and optimism, because you've talked about the changing workforce, we've talked about needing to bridge, the gender gap. But what, Michelle, I'm going to start with you. What gives you the most hope for the future?
Well, first, to reflect what the DG said about leaving no one behind. As long as we're rooted in that principle, and the entirety of the SDG framework is rooted in that principle, it is intended to close the gap between how the world is and what the world should be, but with a special emphasis on leaving no one behind. Yeah. And that we're bringing it up in rooms like this and up and down the street the rest of this week gives me a lot of hope. But the other thing that gives me a lot of hope about this is that this is a solvable problem. I find both kind of power, sometimes a little bit of frustration, but a little bit of power in this idea that gender inequality is a solvable problem. All we need is more political will and more solidarity. That's all we need. Solidarity and making sure everyone is around the table, and then political will to do the right thing. So making sure that girls and women have equal access to emerging technology, that they have the ability to use it to improve their lives, to compete for jobs, making sure they have that is definitely a solvable problem. So I have a lot of hope in that, because we don't need a crazy leap in science or a moonshot to just make sure that girls and women have the equal opportunity to play, to compete, and to win, just like everybody else.
I absolutely love that. We have a lot of what looks like insurmountable problems and challenges ahead, and just to say, this one we got. I love that. Director General, for you.
No, I will go in line with Michelle. All of that being said and done, as I was mentioning at the very beginning, I see the AI as a huge opportunity for us to address, first of all, even if I go beyond ILO, this whole inequality that is growing right now. But I think AI can help us narrow in the inequalities, which is one. Secondly, in terms of solving the poverty challenge that we have in the world, the AI is already contributing in helping youngsters all over the world to be their own entrepreneur and to using their creativity, etc. on that. So for me, it's very important. The more you'll hear me talking about the need for governance, etc. In fact, my message is that because of the potential of what lies ahead, so I'm very I'm thrilled. And we just ILO and the World Bank we published a report a few weeks in July, I think, a few weeks ago, which again put together, the potential that is ahead of us, and while reminding us what we need to handle in order to make it. I will call it simply the enablers on that. But for the rest, that being said, I'm also very hopeful. You mentioned the PPP. This session itself, the fact that Microsoft Philanthropies is organizing that, for me, is already part of what keeps me very, very hopeful.
Good.
You see already a lot of activities bringing naturally the private sector, the UN system, the member states on that. And in Davos last January, that also was very clear that when you talk about AI, you can see all parties bringing together. I'm just making a plea that let's do everything to solve in a way that it will be acceptable for all the governance issue, keeping in mind that at the end also, we have to be human-centered.
We have to be human-centered. That is at the mission of this. Well, I am now even more hopeful that when I show up here next year, if the philanthropies team will invite me back, that I will have a different stat on our women in STEM professions, and that the economic development and opportunities that are in front of us, we're able to seize those and work together. Thank you both for joining us. It has been an absolute pleasure.